And I'm sorry for using that term, tapes up. It's a speedway term, and as you can probably tell, I've been kind of busy with the speedway, so I do apologise for the lack of content. But I must admit, when I got that question from one of the viewers, I thought, I know exactly who to get in touch with. I'll get in touch with Tracy Keogh because she is the Brendan Dassey confession expert. I would imagine that the next time that Steve and Laura need help with something, they're going to get in touch with Melbourne, Australia, and ask you for your help and advice on the matter.
Well, I don't know so much about the word expert, but yeah, I'd be willing to do anything for them. So I'm
Yes,
sure they know that. I'm sure they know that.
exactly. And just in case, because the last time we chatted would have probably have been the keep talking till they're walking.
Yeah, I'd say so. It's some
Yeah,
time ago.
yep. And then there's always, constantly, there are new people. People come up to me and say, "Oh, I watched that Making a Murderer. Oh, what did you think of it?" Well, it's terrible. It's absolutely shocking. And so there's always these new people coming on board, getting on the train, as it were.
Yeah.
So just before we get going, you're in Melbourne, Australia. It's like, well, the obvious question then is there are people in Wisconsin, in Manitowoc County, in Calumet, that are quite happy with the fact that Stephen and Brendan are locked up. Because as far as they're concerned, they're not very nice people. And if some of the rules are bent a little bit, so what? We don't really care. And I suppose the question is, well, then, if they don't even care about their own countrymen, why should the rest of the world have any sort of say in the matter, or be concerned, etc., etc.?
I think it's because you can't well, everybody who's actively involved in advocating or campaigning for somebody who's wrongfully convicted is because they haven't been able to walk past it. And I
Yeah,
think in perhaps in hometowns and rural areas in Wisconsin, that the status quo is much easier to put your faith in than questioning something. And I think we see that increasingly across the world, that people prefer not to question too hard for fear of what they might find, and what they might find may go against their own beliefs. So I dare say that that's probably something that plays into it. And the Stephen and Brendan's injustice, there's a legacy to that in Wisconsin, which stems back
yes,
to Stephen's first wrongful incarceration and conviction. And regardless of what facts you put in front of some people, there are always going to be those who refuse to believe, you know.
yeah, yeah. So let's just jump straight into then is it the interview that Brendan had with a Detective O'Neill in Marinette County? Have I got that bit right?
Yeah, so it was with Baldwin and O'Neill.
Right.
Yeah, so it was the two of them. They were from Marinette County Sheriff's Office. But yeah, I think for particularly if there are people listening in that are quite new to the case, that it might be good, if we set a little timeline for people so they understand some of what was happening leading up to the November 6th interrogation. So
Sure, sure. So
um,
you mentioned a Baldwin. Is there not
mm,
also a Wendy Baldwin at Calumet County?
there is indeed. There were a few Baldwins.
Ah,
Yes.
right. Okie dokie. Because I'm
Yeah.
thinking, how come somebody from Calumet County has already gone up to? And by the way, where is Crivets in relation to Stephen Brendan?
Well, actually, because you would know from my podcast if you've listened,
Mm-hmm.
um, that it's around 81 miles from Two
Yep,
Rivers to the family cabin in Crivets,
yep.
which is up in northern Wisconsin. So yeah.
And they go there. What? Once they finished raping and murdering somebody, they go up there. What? Just to rest a bit of R&R.
Well, sure, they were going up there to cut wood, wasn't it? It was to collect
Yeah,
firewood. I think yeah, I think it's when we talk about November the 6th interrogation of Brendan,
Yeah.
let's make no mistake that it was not a witness interview. It was an interrogation. Brendan was not Mirandized. And it did begin as a read interview, right? Which in theory is a fact-finding assessment exercise. But history shows that it quickly bore the hallmarks of a read interrogation, which assumes guilt. Right. So all of what happened obviously is really unknown territory for Brendan, right? So he's barely turned 16. It's like 2 weeks since he turned 16 at this time, and he's socially averse. We know now that he was profoundly impaired with speech and language impairments, and he was just a kid, right? He was just a boy. And importantly, he never had any interaction with law enforcement. So this is something where he's clearly out of his depth and he's outmatched, But what we've got to remember is that, okay, so November the 3rd, Karen Holbach reports her daughter missing.
Yeah.
And Calumet County calls Manitowoc County for assistance. November the 4th, the search efforts for Teresa escalate, and that's when Brendan, well, not that's when, but Brendan and Chuck on the 4th travel to the cabin in Crivets. Meanwhile, we know that Calumet and Manitowoc officers are seizing the Avery salvage yard and searching Stephen's garage and trailer. And Brendan has gone with his uncle to spend the weekend collecting firewood. That is what they've gone to do. Little would he know what is unfolding.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if we jump to the 6th, right? Do you want me to jump to the 6th? You lead me.
Yeah, sure. No, it was just that as you say, reported missing. That was the Thursday, wasn't it?
The 3rd, yeah.
And then on the Friday is the 4th when Steve and Brendan go up. And does Chuck go up in the morning of the Saturday morning? Have I got that bit right?
It's the other way round.
It's the other way round.
Yeah, so Chuck and Brendan go up on the 4th.
Yeah.
And Stephen, I believe, goes up on the 5th.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And at some point in between there, we've got a paperman delivering a newspaper where he supposedly has seen a RAV4 being pushed onto the property, which is then found miraculously by Pam Sturm within 20 minutes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty exceptional.
And apparently, from all accounts, when they actually found the vehicle, there really wasn't much sort of looking inside to see, is she there? Is there any sign of her and that kind of stuff? You almost get the impression that they know that the car's empty.
Absolutely. I mean, I think if you're looking for somebody, and Pam Stern had a familial contact with Teresa Holbach, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So if you're out there looking for somebody, and particularly if you're supposedly close to them or they're part of your family somewhere along the lineage, then the first thing you're going to be doing is trying to smack that door down or get that boot open to see if she's there.
Yeah.
Right. But there's none of that. There's none of that. It's Pam Sturm demanding to be told that what she's found is what they're looking for.
Yeah.
So there's so many questions. There's so many questions, right? Because it wasn't done correctly. The investigation wasn't done correctly. So there's always going to be these loose ends that, unless we have somebody come forward with the truth, that will never be answered, because there's how do you find the truth if an investigation hasn't been conducted correctly?
So I'm just muting because I've just had somebody come to the door. That sets the dogs off. I apologise for that.
That's okay. It'll wake everybody up, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. And just 10 minutes ago, the next door neighbour was drilling in his garage, and I'm right behind the door. But anyway, that's yeah. The so yes. Do we know what time Steve and Brendan went up to Crivets? Did they say it was quite early in the morning?
That I don't know. I don't
Oh,
know
right,
what
yeah.
time that they went up. But I do know that November the 6th, which is, what we're talking about here today, is
Ah, yes, yeah,
it's approximately, because I've done a lot of research into a lot of this, obviously for the
sure.
podcast, right? So these granular details, unfortunately, have been embedded in my brain after numerous edits of podcasts. But it was 11:55 a.m. on the 6th
Yep,
that the detectives O'Neill and Baldwin
yep.
spot Brendan and Brendan's brother Brian driving Stephen Avery's car, right? So, which was the subject of a separate search warrant. Now, the boys had ventured into town from the cabin, which was actually in Stevenson, to buy
Yep.
Mountain Dew, right? Now, all
Yeah.
of this sounds so innocent, right? Just a normal day. They're up there with their uncle. They're, you know, getting firewood. They're going to buy Mountain Dew. Now, after the officers identify the boys as Stephen's nephews, the car seized
Mm-hmm.
and Brendan and Brian are separated from each other.
Yep.
Now, we know that the first interrogation of Brendan takes place in the back of a police car,
Yes.
and it lasts for about 45 minutes. And I think it's really important for people to remember, because I think sometimes November the 6th gets a bit lost, right? Because we've got these 4 interrogations over the 48 hours, and a lot of
Yes.
emphasis is put on that. But, there's a lot of foundational uh,
Mm-hmm.
content that's embedded in Brendan's narrative from November the 6th. And,
Yep.
we've also got to remember that O'Neill doesn't advise Brendan of his Miranda rights.
No.
He does tell Brendan he's not under arrest and he's free to leave. But for a moment, if you imagine you're Brendan, right? The car you were in has been seized and it's towed away. You've been separated from your brother and you're wholly reliant
Yeah.
on the officers for transport. So Brendan's movement is effectively restricted.
Yeah.
He doesn't know his Fifth Amendment rights.
No.
He doesn't know his right to terminate the interview. I use the term loosely,
Yes.
or even remove himself from custody, because the
Yeah.
doors to the car were closed.
Yeah.
And if we take into consideration Brendan's social and perhaps educational challenges, and as many have said, right, that there's no reasonable person in Brendan's shoes who would have felt free to terminate that encounter and leave. So I think it's very obvious when you're reading the transcripts and listening to the interrogation that it quickly became a custodial interrogation.
Yeah.
And we listen to O'Neill execute both a Reed interview and an interrogation during these 45 minutes, and it's a selective interrogation, right? So he chooses selective steps from the Reed interrogation technique, and we know that Reed is weaponized
Yeah.
when investigators basically cherry pick whichever steps that they want.
Yeah.
I mean, even Reed themselves will attest to that. So God forbid, it shouldn't be used on kids anyway. But and particularly those with intellectual deficits like Brandon had at the time. And O'Neill jumps into this interrogation piece without even completing due diligence with the interview. So if we're talking about read best practices,
Mm-hmm.
even interrogation practices, right? There's no independent investigation to either corroborate or discredit Brendan's story from the
Mm-hmm.
interview. You just
Yeah.
go straight into the interrogation.
Indeed. So if I can just take you back though,
Yeah.
as you said that him and Blaine got into Stephen's car and drove into to pick up celebratory drink for the fact that they've got away with this rape and murder. I mean, it's as you say, it just doesn't make sense, does it?
No.
They apparently they do know that the police are sort of surrounding the cabin. Is that right?
Well, as far as I know, I don't know if Brendan does at that stage.
Right.
I'm not sure that Brendan was aware at that stage what was unfolding at the the Avery
Yeah.
yard.
Yeah.
It was actually Brian that Brendan was with. Brian was driving his
Yes.
car. I
Yeah.
think Brian at the time was 20, so
Yes.
obviously the older brother. But yeah, I mean, this is an innocent day. This isn't
Yeah.
every day or every week, or this is how the family,
Hmm.
um, took time out. They just went up to the cabin, and we
Yeah.
know that Alan Avery continues to do that. That's how they live their lives.
Yes. Yeah.
This was nothing out of the ordinary for this family. What was happening at the salvage yard certainly was.
Yeah.
Um, but you could only imagine that Brendan would have felt a million miles away from what was going on. Why would he think to be involved with it? Obviously, he's worried about Stephen, and we hear that in the interrogation at
Hmm.
Crivets.
Hmm.
He is concerned because he asks them, when O'Neill's on this tirade, he asks them, do you think he did it?
Uh,
So it's
that's.
yeah,
I mean, that's an interesting question, isn't it? Because Brendan, as far as we know, has never ever had any interaction with police officers before.
no, that's right. I think Brendan, like I said, he barely turned 16.
Hmm.
He's a boy, and he's quite a naive boy, of course. He's had no interaction. He's socially averse.
Yeah.
We go on to find out that he's obviously, quite suggestible, and we found out through Under the Hood that Brendan and so many other impaired adolescents like him develop strategies to hide their disabilities and
Yeah.
avoid negative social, situations. So, by all accounts, Brendan's strategies appear to involve, extreme compliance agreeing to just about everything. So, trying to do what the person in authority wants and pretending to understand and not asking for clarification. And we see those behaviors across all of these interrogations with investigators. He
Hmm.
never asks for clarification. So you can assume that that would be a correct statement in regards to Brendan's behaviors and the strategies that he did develop for himself. Um,
Sure.
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, looking at that under the hood analysis that was done by those two professors, wasn't it? It was very interesting. One of the things they talk about is the word count, and I seem to recall that even in that police car with the ticker or the blinker going,
Yeah.
the word count against Brendan must be quite huge. I don't know. Did they ever do that one as a statistic?
Yeah, I spoke with Professor Michelle Levine and Dr. Sally Miles
Yes.
co-authored the analysis, and I've spoken with Professor Levine quite a few times. She's quite incredible. And while they didn't report on it in the analysis, Dr. Sally Miles absolutely looked at November as well, and
Yep.
basically said that's where it all began, right? So
Hmm.
the word salad and the long rambling content started straight away, pretty much straight away. And if you've listened to the interrogation with that incessant blinker, I've often questioned whether this was a ploy, whether the sound of the blinker was a ploy to distract Brendan and rattle his thinking. Because I don't know about you, but just listening to it is really quite unsettling to listen to. Um, but yeah, I mean, you know, the there's no doubt the officers from November the 6th on all employed the same sort of tactics, and that's read, right?
Hmm.
So they're never really going to deviate too much from each other in the way that they interact with Brendan and the way that they talk to Brendan, because I think for Wiegert and Fassbender, after November the 6th, they would have been fully across Brendan's vulnerability to read, right? And the fact that, you know, Brendan comes out of this interrogation on the 6th of November, being targeted basically because, you know, he's obviously a target because he has this deference to authority. You know, and I think, you know, just talking about the actual interrogations, there's a few pieces that I've taken out of it just to demonstrate some
Sure.
of the things that we're talking about. You know, like when we listen to it, we, you know, O'Neill and Baldwin are taking turns questioning Brendan. And I don't know about you, but for me, it's kind of like you've definitely got this good cop, bad cop shit happening, right? So you've
Yeah.
got Baldwin, who's a bit more relaxed in his questioning,
Sure.
and you've got O'Neill that comes in like a bull at a gate. And you know, for the first 20 minutes, it's pretty academic, right? It's just it's formal, it's academic. Brendan's answering the questions fired at him, predominantly from Baldwin to begin with. But you know, we've got to remember it's a foreign and intimidating environment. And Brendan tells them he never saw Teresa on the 31st. And we know he was walking with Blaine, his brother, from the school bus. This is basically Brendan's truth. But at exactly 20 minutes and 35 seconds, the tempo changes, right? There's been a protracted silence. And there was a point where Baldwin was actually readying to take Brendan back to the cabin. And O'Neill pops out of the car, comes back, you know, a couple of more questions, pops out again. And then we've got that silence and he returns for the final time. And O'Neill at that 20, just past that 20-minute mark, adopts a confrontational tone and his version of Reed basically gets underway. Now, I think the following exchange is critical, right, to the officers changing and molding Brendan's narrative, and it basically lays the foundation for all that Brendan endured and continues to endure. I don't know what other people think, but, you know, obviously this is just my take on it. So I don't know if you've got the transcript in front of you, Paul.
I've not got it in front of me. No, I'm trying
Okay.
to in the chat there, trying to share a link, and I've asked if I can make Mystic Jinx a moderator, and I certainly can. But no, so there was one thing I was going to point out.
Yeah.
Bizarrely, I remember once listening to it was a police interrogation of my cousin's brother-in-law, and all the way through, when you listen to the tape, it was interrupted every 15 seconds with what the time was.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, what on earth is that all about? You know, is that really just to annoy people? And I think you're absolutely right about that. You know, that annoying
Blinker.
blinker going. Absolutely
Yeah.
spot on.
Yeah, because why would it have been on?
Well,
Right? They're in
you
the
know,
car, the doors are closed, they're obviously stationary. What was the
yeah,
use for it? I mean, yeah, it's, you know, I'm not an expert. I'm just throwing my thoughts out there. But coming back to the piece in the interrogation,
sure.
it starts off with O'Neill, right? So he's got back into the car. It's 20 minutes, 35 seconds in, and O'Neill fires off. It's a total different tone. It's like, okay, it's not too often that somebody's standing by your house, by the field, taking pictures of the van. You got dropped off from school. How many other people were on that bus? So Brendan comes back with 15 and 16, and it goes on and whatever. O'Neill comes back, and you were dropped off. It's such an event that someone's standing in your field taking a picture of that van that you remember that too, don't you? The bus driver remembers it. The
Yeah.
kids on the school bus remember it. The girl taking pictures, you remember that? And Brendan comes back with, well, I wasn't looking at it. And, you know, I wasn't looking in the field. And O'Neill, right? So
Yep.
again, you know, we find a lot through all of these interrogations that a lot of the questions that Brendan gets asked demand a yes or no answer. And yes or no questions, you know, traditionally hold a higher risk of contamination.
Yeah.
So anyway, so O'Neill comes back with, you got off that bus and you started walking towards your house. And Brendan comes back with, well, sometimes I'm talking to Blaine. right? And then here's where Baldwin really starts to bring it home.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you remember that girl taking that picture. You're getting off the bus. It's a beautiful day. It's daylight and everybody sees her. You do too. Do you remember seeing that girl standing there taking a picture?
Hmm.
And then Brendan comes back with maybe. I don't know. I don't remember.
Yeah.
And Baldwin comes in. Brendan, come on. And then O'Neill comes in with something I think is pretty important here. He goes, you do know, don't you? Brendan, you're not going to disappoint any of us.
Hmm.
Think about that girl. Was that girl standing there taking a picture that day? Now, I just want to stop on the word disappoint,
Hmm.
right? Because I think that's the type of language that would have been a trigger for Brendan. So when we talk about Brendan's strategies and
Yeah.
his compliance agreeing, I think a word like disappoint would have been a trigger for him to comply.
Yeah.
So, and again, it's just my thoughts. And then you've got Brendan going, well, maybe. And O'Neill's gone, it's a yes or a no. I'm not putting
Hmm.
nothing in your mind. You tell me if you remember that girl standing there taking pictures. O'Neill, was she? Why won't you tell me? So Brendan comes back with, I was just trying to think if I see her. O'Neill, well, did you see her standing there taking a picture? Brendan comes back, yeah.
He's just given up, hasn't he? He's just sort of like, they've just browbeaten him. I mean, the thing is that day, she was there when the bus wasn't, and she dropped them off at the turnaround. That's not where the car was. Yes, kids would have seen her maybe other days, but
Yeah.
not that day.
No, that's right. And O'Neill's like, why didn't you tell me that? You
Hmm.
scared? And Brendan goes, yeah, right? The kid is scared. Of course he's scared, right? So, the remaining 20 minutes or so of that interrogation continues in the same adversarial vein.
Yeah.
And, blatantly, O'Neill and Baldwin manipulate Brendan's narrative to the point that he's admitting that he saw Teresa Holbach. He admits that he saw Teresa Holbach, that he
Yeah.
saw her car. But Brendan had already told them at the beginning he hadn't, right? But as soon as they talk about being disappointed, Brendan comes in with that compliance.
Yeah.
And, Brendan was walking from the school bus that day, as he did every day with his brother Blaine.
Yeah.
So you tell me, why did Blaine not see her?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why, because neither did Brendan.
Yeah.
This is not his story.
Yeah.
This is just a story that O'Neill and Baldwin need him to adopt.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
And we can't forget, and I think it's really important with this. This is why November the 6th is really, really important. That around the 49-minute mark, that O'Neill and Baldwin, they reassure Brendan that he isn't going to jail.
Hmm.
It's that, okay, this has been oft quoted, like, it's okay, let's get beyond being scared. Let's
Yeah.
get beyond the idea of you getting in trouble and going to jail, because that's not going to happen.
Hmm.
Well, they lied, right? That was a false promise of leniency, and Brendan was under interrogation. He was not read his Miranda rights, and he was
Hmm.
most certainly not free to go.
No.
And it's clear that the tone and content of O'Neill and Baldwin's questioning was a textbook Miranda interrogation.
Indeed. And so obviously we as you suggested, we can split this into, and it'd be great if you could join me for a few more chats. But there's a big gap, isn't there, between Crivets and the February? What sort of events occur that are causing this gap, so to speak? Because
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing, and it's something that's been like I've been a dog at a bone with for a good few years, to be quite honest with you. I mean, we know from November the 6th that the law enforcement now know that within the Avery Dassey family, that there's somebody that they can effectively read on, uh, and manipulate the narrative with. And we see that, right? But they leave Brendan alone. So They do speak to him again on the 10th. I haven't really seen much about that particular interview / interrogation. I find it hard to call any of them a witness interview, to be honest.
Sure.
I think maybe perhaps the first 20 minutes in Crivets was, but it's certainly changed. But it does strike me as something that I would love to know more about that they come back to Brendan on February the 27th at Mishcot High. And, for me, it's like, how did we get from Crivets in November to an interrogation at Mishcot High School in February? And I've spoke about this many times, and we know that it was his cousin, right? She was just a child herself, but you cannot convince me that an adult wasn't behind her story.
Yeah.
Because why did she not go to her school counselor previously? It's just, I think that that's something that interests me. I do believe that there was adult intervention with Brendan's cousin taking that story to the school counsellor.
When we were in Melbourne, we went to a footy game. There's somebody in the chat that unfortunately is unfortunately he's one of those Crows fans from Adelaide, and he's put up here. The poor fella. I mean, I do like him because we've got the Italian connection. But that was Dr. Silkman's first comment.
Yeah. No, there's always footy on.
Yeah,
Are you kidding me? My husband and youngest are avid Richmond fans. They were at the game. They were at the game late on Thursday night, actually, up at the MCG. I think you guys went to the MCG, didn't you?
It was actually the Marvel Stadium, and it was St Kilda versus the West Coast Suns.
Yeah.
And we nearly managed to get Stacey and the dude arrested.
I remember.
Mark was killing himself laughing because he was watching it all unload. I was coming back from the bar, and there was all these police going here, there, and everywhere. and that's when
it was a good time.
It was very good. Yeah, I mean, it was just like one of those sort of naughty boy things that you do, like.
Yeah.
I mean, you get the four of us together, there was very much a sort of naughty boy attitude. Mark obviously is quite the sort of calm one, he's sort of very, very, dare I say, sort of conservative, he's sort of very, a bit more old school, if you like, and then
a bit more traditional, perhaps.
Yeah, and the dude, I would say next, and then the real troublemakers are Stacey and myself.
I swear, when I met you at, the night with Laura and Stephen, I thought you looked like trouble, mate. You had the look of cheek about you, for sure.
Yeah. Yes, that's exactly right. But so really, what you're saying then is that this whole interview, it changes Brendan to saying, yes, I did see Teresa.
Absolutely, because Brendan begins with his truth. He didn't see Teresa.
Yeah.
He was with Blaine. He goes home. He plays PlayStation 2.
Yeah.
He doesn't see Teresa.
Yeah.
And then you've got that direct interaction that I went through where you see it.
Yeah.
And, I go back to that word disappoint. I go back to how, children and juveniles with impairments develop strategies to hide their disabilities and anything to avoid negative social interactions, right? So the word disappoint, once that comes into play, Brendan's narrative starts falling and aligning with the narrative that they want him to adopt, right?
Yeah.
So he starts off, and I think at the very beginning, what Brendan's telling them is absolutely 100% the truth.
Yes.
And then we just see, particularly O'Neill, when he comes in after that protracted silence, and he gets back into the car, and he's straight out of the gate confrontational with Brendan. The whole tempo of that conversation has changed,
Yeah.
and I can only imagine being in that car for somebody like Brendan, with his youth and with his suggestibility, with those vulnerabilities that he had.
Yeah.
That would have been a really intimidating situation, right? So you don't want to piss anybody off there.
No.
And he's in a car that he can't get out of, and he knows that he doesn't have another car to get into to go home. So he's dependent on these investigators to get him home. So again, as we see over the course of all of Brendan's interactions with law enforcement, that Brendan becomes very compliant. He wants to please. Like, an
Yes.
indication of that is when they walk into the the interrogation room on March the 1st, and there's a split second you see Brendan smiling. They're obviously talking to him and having a bit of a laugh as they walk into that room.
Yeah.
Brendan has no sense of the danger that's coming for him.
Hmm.
And yeah, I think particularly with November the 6th, this is laying the foundation, right? They got Brendan to say that he saw her. They got Brendan to say that he saw the car. And they also get Brendan to say that he saw Stephen and that he was in the
Hmm.
garage with Stephen that night. So none of that is true, but they got Brendan to say it,
Yeah.
and I think it was just very much an indication of how they knew to elicit things from Brendan to align with what they needed.
Yeah. I mean, going back to, as you say, the word disappoint, that
Mm,
just reminds me of the control question. Do you
mhm.
disagree with me?
Yes,
And
yeah,
it's just that same sort of, coercion. Uh, you know,
yeah,
it's and it's funny, isn't it? How as I often said, this word bluff. They're allowed to bluff,
yeah.
and it's almost. I mean, here in the UK, I don't know if you know about this. There's a game show called Call My Bluff,
Oh, I do. Yeah,
and it's where you get people come up with three different explanations of a particular word, and you've got to try and figure out which one is it. And it's
Mm.
bluff just sounds very, very friendly, but in actual
Yeah,
fact, it's anything but.
yeah, yeah.
And
Oh,
as you say, sorry, they're bluffing to him, and he's just accepting it. If they
yeah.
if they tell me that's that, if they tell me I should have seen it, then I should have seen it. Therefore, yeah, okay,
I think it's a little bit more sinister than bluff,
yes,
insofar as that they keep pushing Brendan. They keep pushing him until he complies. So it's like, was she? Huh? Why won't you tell me? And
yeah,
and Brendan's like, I'm just trying to think if I see her. And O'Neill's like, well, did you see her standing there taking the picture? Why didn't you tell me? You scared? Like, he doesn't leave him alone.
oh no,
You
no,
remember that girl taking that picture. It's not saying, you know, did you see anybody taking that picture?
yeah,
Baldwin's in there going, you remember that girl taking that
yeah,
picture. You're getting off the bus. It's a beautiful
yeah,
day. It's
yeah.
daylight. Everybody sees her. You do too.
Yeah,
Right.
we're,
So
we're, we're telling you what you saw.
exactly.
Just agree with us, because as you say, we've got your car. You're in the car with us. You're locked in. We don't care when you get back, if you
Yeah.
get back.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And after all of that, they're like, let's get beyond being scared, Brendan. Let's get beyond the idea of you getting in trouble and going to jail, because that's not going to
yeah,
happen. Yeah, well, it did happen, and it's still happening. You know,
hmm,
and one of the things, actually, I think it was this week that I saw, which is just horrific. Is that we know that Miranda warnings, um, Miranda warnings are usually invoked by people who have knowledge of the criminal system, put it that way. The majority, I think, is up to like 85% of people who waive their Miranda rights
hmm,
believe their innocence is enough, right?
yeah,
And I think it was this week the U.S. Supreme Court seems poised to reverse the decision of Miranda, and which would give states, the individual states, and individual towns, the power to decide, whether police should be legally required to give these warnings. Where this leaves kids, I just don't know, right?
Yeah.
I just don't know. I mean, Miranda's something else that I can go off on a massive tangent when you have time, but and particularly Kaczynski, and yeah.
I was going to say, and also Michael Ciccini, who's written quite a lot about it, hasn't he? And he's been
Yeah,
on your podcast, and he is,
yeah,
as you say, he's a great fella to have a chat
yeah.
with about these things. And
The interesting thing about Michael is, he's very generous with his time, and it's a great conversation with Michael. But what I found really interesting when I was doing the podcast was, I was asking him questions about being a defense lawyer, right? So Kaczynski was, supposedly defending Brendan, and it was interesting to discover that there's a certain element of not looking after your own. That's certainly not what Michael was doing,
yeah,
but it could almost be a little bit confronting to have to talk about other defense attorneys, right, and their
yes,
tactics and things
yeah,
like that. But yeah, when you talk about Miranda, and I think it's actually important in this context, right? Because this is a Miranda interrogation, and Brendan should have been read his Miranda rights. Whether he would have understood them or waived them or whatever at that point, we just don't know, right? But wrongfully convicted people do waive their Miranda rights because, again, we get back to that innocence question. But Kaczynski, when people talk about Kaczynski, and one of the things they forget is that at the suppression hearing where he waived Brenda's Miranda arguments, he basically conceded that Brendan was not in custody for Feb 27th and the March 1st interrogations. That is outrageous to me. That is outrageous to me. There are so many issues, and the Miranda warning is just another one of them to pile on the list, But
yeah,
it is worth remembering that the state didn't use the November 6th statement as direct evidence, but they do introduce the audio from it to support O'Neill's summation of Brendan's demeanour when he takes the stand.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, just that O'Neill, he got a bit of a telling off, didn't he, from not was it Fremgen?
Fremgen?
Yeah, the older dude, not
Oh, that's
not the young one.
Edelstein.
Yeah, that's
Edelstein.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's clearly followed the case because I see him getting out of a taxi in Chicago to go to the Seventh Circuit hearings. So yeah, it must have impacted on him. So the next official interviews are they the official ones that took place at the police stations, or are we talking Fox Hills?
Oh, we're talking Mishcot High.
That's right. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was that. And now, as you say, let's save that for the next episode. And because I realise it's getting kind of late over there in
Australia.
in Straya. Yeah, it's funny. I keep reminiscing about all the things that happened there, But I think for me that the abiding memory is of the dude when you gave him that pass to go backstage to meet them. Him coming out and he was like high as a kite for. Well, like forever, he kept talking about it, kept on talking, ad infinitum. It was great, and it was just such a wonderfully kind thing for you to do because you knew because you said to me, didn't you? Do you want this free pass? I said no, give it to the dude because I've met Laura and David and Steve Prison before, but that was a wonderfully kind thing that you did. So yeah, very
Sure.
much appreciated.
It was it was quite joyful, to be honest.
Yeah.
We were all in there having a chat, and Richard was in his element,
Yeah.
and really, yeah, I think, like, the smile on his face was massive. I remember walking in with him, and I was quite nervous because I was born nervous, right? That's just who I am. And Richard was like, "Why are you nervous?" And I'm like, I'm 5'1", and Rich was like, what, 6'4",
Four.
six
Yeah.
five or
Yeah.
something.
Six. I
And
think six. Yeah.
I just remember looking up at him and going, "I can't help it, man. I can't help it. Like,
Yeah.
I'm 5'1" and, like, got too much to say for myself. It makes me nervous." But yeah, no, it was a lovely time, and it was nice to share that with Richard, for
Well,
sure.
I think what really made his day was the fact that he didn't have to introduce himself as Richard. Steve
Yeah.
Drizzen immediately knew who he was, and apparently said to him, "Dude, you seriously think that Captain Crunch is British?"
Yeah. Oh, I remember when Captain Crunch set off on a Saturday morning on Twitter. I woke
Yeah.
up to Richard bringing me into that discussion, and I was like, "You guys, really, really, it's cereal, man. We were talking
It
about
it, it
cereal."
is it is yeah, yeah.
But
It
no,
was
it's
it
all
was
good.
well, yeah. It was just a way of sort of having a bit of fun amongst ourselves, but also, yeah, there's the you know I did on a more serious thing. I said that I produced this fake document that if if you want Captain Crunch to be British, we will interrogate him, and we will get him to confess to being British, and anything else you want us to get him to confess to, which
Yeah,
obviously it's a parody of what they did to Brendan. But
yeah,
let's
yeah.
so just before then, do we know when Wiegert and Fassbender were first sort of teamed up together?
I don't know,
It would have
when
been
law
early on, wouldn't
enforcement
it?
put them together, but I dare say it was early on, right? Because
Yes.
when they went into the February the 27th, they knew exactly what they were doing.
Yeah.
So, as far as tag teams go, they were pretty informed.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, I was just looking at Dr. Silkman, where he said that they should hang their heads in shame in what they did to Brendan, simply incredulous. And I couldn't agree more. Like, the more you look into it, like, I know when I was doing, the depth of research for the podcast, and I'd go,
Hmm.
research before each episode and what have you, I was always finding things that I didn't know that they
Mm.
had done to Brendan.
Yeah.
And there's an incredible sadness about that, an incredible sadness, and even greater that it's still not rectified, right? That it's still that guy who couldn't possibly describe a crime, let alone commit one, is anywhere near a correctional facility, let alone nearly 17 years in one.
Mm.
It's so egregious. It's so outrageous. Like, and it's a stain on Wisconsin. It's an absolute stain.
It is, because if it hadn't have been Bert and Ernie and
Mm,
Kaczynski and O'Kelly
yeah.
and Kratz and Garn and Fallon, we know perfectly well there would have been a whole load of other ones that would have taken their place, and we would still have the same problem.
But there was a
It's
cast of thousands, wasn't there? There was a
yeah.
cast of thousands in the wings. So yeah, but
Well, as a friend of a close friend of the dude who used to, he knew the dude before I even did. A
mm.
Yorkshireman, Mark Oddy, that was on the show once.
Oh yes,
He always used to use the expression, when it comes to law enforcement, all compasses point north.
mm,
And so clearly what had happened is because the car is found on the property, um,
yeah.
one can imagine that Marinette County, that they would know perfectly well what was going on, because this was big news, wasn't it?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I when O'Neill pops out of the car, he pops out a couple of times. It's not a coincidence that he comes back in that second time. with a different tone and the confrontation
Yeah.
and careers into the Reed interrogation. Even though he bastardized it,
Hmm.
there's no doubt that that's what happened. So for me, when he leaves the car, he's being given information from the yard,
Hmm.
or he's being given information, because there's such a disparity in the before and after in the way that they approach this interrogation with Brendan on the 6th.
Yeah. And I can't help thinking that the likes of all of the police departments, within quite a wide radius, possibly throughout Wisconsin, were aware of the fact that Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department had a huge problem with the $36 million lawsuit, because
Oh,
it was news for like sort of about a year, wasn't it?
oh, for sure. I mean, it would have been news from the time that Stephen was being released
Yes.
from that wrongful conviction. And, when he was part of the Avery Bill and all those types of things, that was I could only imagine that was quite high profile in
Mm.
Wisconsin. I haven't been to Wisconsin, sadly, yet. But I could imagine that was quite high profile. So,
Yeah.
you know, there is, you have to ask yourself, are there 1,000 coincidences,
Hmm.
or, was this planned?
Hmm.
Is it a mixture of both? Because of the fact the investigation was such a mess, we'll never know. We'll never know. But what we do know for sure, 100%, and it's something that every opportunity I have, I remind people, is that there was zero DNA of Brendan Dassey found anywhere. There
Mm.
was zero evidence linking Brendan Dassey to any crime anywhere. And, we have Sherry Culhane, as I put on that billboard. We have Sherry Culhane testifying to that on
Yes.
cross,
Yeah.
with Jerry Booting. So the only thing they had was a story that they had Brendan adopt over a series of interrogations, and it took how many interrogations for Brendan to get it right for them on the 1st of March, right? So they basically groomed Brendan into the March 1st interrogation.
Hmm. Yeah. As I say, the thing that always struck me was the fact that you've got all these like Sir Kenneth Peterson. They ask him, about the fact that such and such had been deposed, and he says, "Well, I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know when that was."
Mm.
What? Are you having a laugh? Of course you
Yeah,
knew perfectly well. It's
yeah,
big news, and it wouldn't just be known amongst the Manitowoc. It would be everywhere. There's all
yeah.
these policemen coming in to give depositions, and they're having to sit at a table with Stephen Avery, and come on, and
It was
and
a
it's
concerted effort by all involved, I
yeah,
think.
yeah.
You know, um,
Anyway,
yeah,
I'm not going to keep you much longer, other than say thank you for joining, and hopefully we can do the next part fairly soon. Um, I'll send you a message, and we can sort out a,
yeah,
a suitable day
absolutely.
and
I,
time.
I, I think it's timely to go back over what
It
happened to
always is,
Brendan.
isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
It
absolutely. Let's look at these interrogations,
yes.
and unpack exactly, what Brendan Dassey was put through.
Yes.
I think it's really important that we continue to chronicle Brendan's
Yes.
story and
Yes.
his injustice,
Yes.
and yeah, and we will, yeah, for sure.
Because there was quite a lot in between November and February, wasn't there, in
Yeah,
the high school, and I
yes,
know I know for a fact that your countryman from Sydney, Hugh Fraser,
mm,
he quite rightly has a real bee in his bonnet
yeah,
about the school and what
yeah.
they allowed to happen.
Oh, absolutely. There was no duty of care to Brendan
Yeah,
as a student under their
yeah,
care.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
um, I mean, it's unfathomable to me to believe that, and we know this to be true, that a child as young as 10 in Wisconsin can be taken from their classroom and interviewed and interrogated by police without necessarily having to inform their parent.
Wow.
10 years of
Yeah.
age.
Yep.
Yeah. No, the school failed Brendan, as so many did, as so many failed Brendan. And predominantly those in positions of authority failed Brendan.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for taking time out on a on a Saturday evening when you should be enjoying all the the comforts of family life, or enjoying some of the bars in Melbourne, or some of the music and stuff, and you've got to listen to the Havering Scotsman. I don't know,
Listen, Paul,
you are a Trojan.
here's the thing, right? I put it off a couple of weeks back, and I was like, I haven't spoken to Paul for some time,
Yeah.
and I don't like to put my face on camera, that, but certainly I'll relish the opportunity to discuss Brendan and the various interrogations. I think it's really important, is particularly while it's quiet legally for Brendan, that we start to unpack this, particularly for people who are new to perhaps this injustice. Let's lay it out for people.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent. And yes, Crockett's made a good point there. Link to Tracy, Paul.
What's DSOTM?
Dark Side of the Moon.
Oh.
Yeah. I was going to say, certainly, if you can send me once again the link to your Freedom and Justice for Brendan Dassey. Have I got it right? Is it the other end?
Sorry, you can never remember. You can never remember. freedomforbrendandassey.com is the website.
Freedom, right.
But I think with all of the various things like the Brendan Dassey project, we've got well over 20,000 people there, all with the same passion for getting justice for Brendan. But I think one of the most important things that I've done to date, and there will be another season of it, is the podcast. And the reason
the 6th hour.
Yeah, 6 hour, you got it, Paul, the wrongful conviction of Brendan Dassey. And the reason being is because, yes, I talk a lot because that's what I do, but there are people who actually know what they're talking about, who generously gave their time to talk to me about Brendan. So there's some, I've been re-listening, and actually it's in the background. I check in just to see how the downloads are going, and people all over the world are still continuing to download.
I'm going to say, does it give you the dude loved his analytics, on YouTube, that showed how many people from where they were. So it shows you which countries people have listened from.
Yeah. Are you hearing a double? I'm hearing myself. Yes, they do. Yeah, the analytics are in the dashboard. There's people from all over the world.
Yep. And roughly how many? Because I remember the dude saying that he'd got 50 people who had tuned in, who had watched a particular video of his. What I think, I can't remember whether it was during. It wouldn't really matter what the video was, but he sent me the whole list of it, and there was even like somebody in Morocco who had watched one of his videos, and I said,
Paul, can you hear this double time? Can people hear this double time?
You sound absolutely fine to me.
That's weird.
Yeah, no, you sound fine to me anyway. Nothing's.
No, yeah, with the analytics, I mean, there's people from Bahamas, right? That freaks me out. There's people in Mongolia that come to the website. I can see the analytics for everything that I do. So with the podcast, I think I'm 25,000 plus downloads so
That's
far.
brilliant.
And the greatest thing about it, though, is that, you know, it's predominantly the US, right? It's predominantly the US because we need the people in the US to be mobilized. They're the people that are on the ground that are able to affect the change. But I think, it always freaks me out. Like, if you can mention a country, and I actually, I'll tell you one that really freaked me out was Bangladesh, because at the moment I'm head of social for World Vision Australia. I've been doing it since January, and you know, we have a program in Myanmar, and you know, we support the vulnerable in Cox's Bazar, like the world's biggest refugee city, if you will. And just to think that somebody in Bangladesh has tuned in and listened to the podcast is just pretty incredible. But
Well,
so it's all good.
I mean, the dude did actually find out who it was in Morocco that had tuned in.
Oh, did he?
Yeah. I
You'd
said
have
to
to
him,
go through IP addresses and stuff, I think, unless
no, it was a lot easier than that. I said to him, dude, where did I go on my holiday? Marrakesh.
Yeah.
Am I going to sit around just drinking beer and sweating my, you know, it's off, and just do nothing? No, I watched a whole load of Ericosi videos. That's how you've got to view it in Morocco. But I certainly haven't been in Thailand.
Oh, yeah. No, it is, or Mongolia, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
I could see you in Mongolia, like,
Absolutely.
but, no, it is interesting, and it's fantastic, and you know, like, the highest downloads with the podcast, for example, is the interview the one with Jason Baldwin has a lot of downloads, but there's the one called The Defense that has the highest downloads. I find that people are looking at the confession orientated podcast episodes more than the others. But yeah, even remember the one I did with yourself and Stacey and Mark?
Yeah.
That continues to get downloaded quite well. They were just enamored with your charm, Paul. What can
Absolutely.
you say?
No, it's Stacey Stacey is the one that Stacey and the dude when they were holding the banner out, you know, and at the Enmore, people were just crowding around, just wanted their photograph taken, A, with the banner, and B, with Stacey and the dude, you know. Yeah. So I was left just to watch and take pictures.
You were the naughty boy at the back, right?
I am indeed, yes, yeah. I actually, at the Enmore Theatre, somebody from security saw me with my camera, obviously video and clips of it, you know, and soon put a stop to it, you know. I thought if I was at the back, they wouldn't see me, but no such luck.
Yeah.
Right, I'm gonna say cheerio, and we'll catch up with you fairly soon. And
cheers, Paul.
We'll have a look at Mishicot High School. Thanks again for joining us, and thanks also to all the guests. And enjoy your evening. What's left of it?
Yeah, cheers, Paul. Have a good one.
And you.
Bye.
Bye for now.